Yanti Jambur Dodan Hingmi Jang, Munum Jambur, Napiat. Pagradargam Santo Shermer Dor, Bumba to Jana Gisham Sar. Sirtir Raptor Gitse May Sir, Janchin Rivian Nis Longerpa, Magic Chujan Tena Ter Division, Logia Mambo Toto Nebati, Lam Namtak Tandan Hai Ter, Tony London, Ayopa Sir, Ranchen Chong de Jande Ranchen Ji. Ranchen Ji, Jabrashava Kiji, Mebartar, Division Tabe Maxandra. 당자가 뇨모 소상 셈치는 용던 어즈네 뇨모 담디 답시시를 제거 남라 담추치처럼 배 스르트 전전을 연에서 농외역세나 라임 동절나 근도 떡바 샤시르 샤什么声音啊쇼든지 바마 말라난 지르톤 바르타르 대진 르자르 뇽모 막상 쳔브르 홍지르 족상 름보치 셈슨 남락즈그네 테더 딱시 리진 남라 추르톤도 지르트르마 버리 켐나 사국나 무즈바 이흐테르나 요티르바 마티 테마시 데흐테르테 양 데란더는 요치 머마르타르 대진 이치나 쳇 런치노테 Chimida Jardin Sarmeta, Chunida Jan Marto Pena, Gurber Dungur, Namargin de Tirgun Dimyon, Chirturbo, Kimnon, Ranchen, Chetir Pai, Chetir Mala, Ranchen of Ter de Yochi, Jupiter Mershida, May Shimanartar, Dejan Chukter, Yeti, Tione, Semson, Namla, Gorbo. Stavar te dar namna te to shabshirin jikten da na changchong yang tag tam jirtar arma la so shamje la yopi sawun nikön jigmet chu marmu chusuk sarmu chusuk dambar jan junshang ge gyarbu ungu boram jin ribar tar semjin namji marg la so somje ji pag rib nang tsada Chukuma Geva Yang, Devjan Geva de la de Laften Ne, Ramji Taber Yaru, Unguburun Yer, Chedang, Nimi Gotan, Londang Sati, Namki, Kin Namji, Tala Tang Armim Jeba, Sebne, Shanki Chertavara, Semchen Yomom Jevang Nanchet. Zoksan Savun Nika Yang, Devjan Gestin Dedang Dele Chumtong. Perverin Gerva Yen
Today's October 26th. I'll mark it as October 26th. And by today, I think this would be the last class for this year, and we'll resume the Uttaratantra Shastra next year around February or March. I will make announcement prior to the actual class. And then, if death doesn't down on any of us, if impermanence doesn't happen, if we were to still have such auspicious connections, then we'll continue with the class on Uttaratantra Shastra. And today we will study as much as we can. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we've already talked about the third metaphor, the third example, where we finished talking about the husk of the grain. And we've already talked about the example or analogy of the bee. And prior to that, we also talked about the example of the white flower or the statue that resides in the white lotus flower. So we've already finished the 3 examples, and today we will talk about the 4th analogy, which is gold in the filth. This example also is given from the 3 aspects. The first one is example and meaning and combined. I think when you're studying the Uttaratantra Shastra, you should understand the key point, which is the existence of Buddha nature. And over here, we're going to learn about, previously we've already talked about the 10 aspects. And over here, we're going to study the 10 examples. So previously, the first one, we've already studied the statue within the white lotus flower. And the second one, we've already talked about the honey within the beehives, and the third one is about the grain within the husk. So that is the essence of the crop, such as barley and such as the different kinds of grains. In fact, each analogy, they have a different angle to talk about the essence or the Buddha nature. Therefore, during the studying of such, I think it is quite important to understand it from the different angles. According to the different translations and the different commentaries, such as the Sangha's commentary and Tapsoji, as well as Miparambache's commentary, they all talked about, they all were very brave about the explanations about these analogies, as well as other masters. They're very, rather quite. Where you come from? Who are you looking for? In India, in fact, when a Pandita is giving the teachings, there are heretics who would then come into the shrine hall and would challenge the Pandita. And at that time, when I saw that person stood up, I thought he was about to challenge me. In India, there are lots of really wise and very sharp Panditas. Sometimes the managers of the shrine hall, as well as the guards, they're not necessarily to be the Panditas, but maybe they are. You never know. Anyhow, usually if someone comes to the gates of the shrine hall, the Panditas who's guarding the gate, they have to debate to defeat the other person. In the Google map, we can see that Nalanda, the map of Nalanda is quite big in terms of the area that it resides, and the monastery or the Shurja that is very close to it. At that time, in fact, the religions are very prosperous at the point. So Buddhism faced many challenges. And in the later time, around the 13th century or so, Nalanda Panditas were very proficient at studying the Buddhism philosophy, but they did not really make the connection of the studying and philosophy of Buddhism with the modern, with the knowledge that is connected to that time at the moment, with the worldly knowledge at the moment. So we should definitely connect both of the worldly knowledge as well as the Buddhism and philosophy together. So you should know about the Hinduism tradition, their customs, and their cultural aspect of their teachings. Because let's look at all the great Panditas at that time. They're very proficient at the knowledge that is taught within Buddhism, but they're not so good at communicating with the worldly people on that level. So that is why the Hinduism at that time started to get quite prosperous. And Buddhism, later on, after 600 or 700 years, from that time, Buddhism started to wane. You don't even hear the name of Buddhism anymore. Therefore, I think it's quite important for Buddhists to practice upon the teachings that you receive, because if you were to only debate, then it is really not of any use in terms of eradicating your own afflictions. And second one is that as Buddhists, you should combine the Buddhism philosophy with the worldly knowledge so that you can propagate the teaching of Buddhism to the people at the time. Therefore, the Buddhists at the time, I know that you're very good in terms of practice, in terms of upholding your precepts, in terms of meditating, in terms of chanting mantras, in terms of studying the 5 treatises. However, if you were to be rather quite off with this world, if you are not connected to this world, if you were to only focus on your study, then sometimes I think it will be rather difficult for you to propagate the teaching. Therefore, you can study the 5 treatises, but at the same time, you should care about what's happening in the society. And we can see the necessity of it in this. We can see the necessity from the historical aspect. And that is why I want to bring up your attention to our curriculum. Now I think we have too many of the Abhidharma classes, but not enough Madhyamika. Of course, it's good for you to study Abhidharma to start with, but I think what's more important is to study Madhyamika. I understand that you should study both the Buddhist logic, the Pramana teachings, and you should also have understanding of Madhyamika and vice versa. They are of the helping aspect of each other. Maybe during the meeting at that time, I was a little distracted, so I didn't really pay lots of attention. And I noticed this year we don't have enough teachings on Madhyamika, so I really hope that you can have maybe more teachings on Madhyamika this year, and this is good to have another meeting in terms of the upcoming curriculum in next year. I hope that you could set the letters. Send the letter for the practitioners who want to attend the Madhyamika classes. You can provide such kind of circumstances and favorable conditions for practitioners. For lamas and jumus who in the Tibetan side, the Tibetan monastics, at the time when Pontsuk Rinpoche were giving teachings to all of us, and he said that we'll just ask one Khenpo to become the Khenpo for the Abhidhamma classes, and he rejected right away and said that no, I don't want to. And then Pontsuk Rinpoche said that, well, I think you're good enough to give the teaching of it. And Pontsuk Rinpoche said that there are other Khenpos who are giving teachings of the precepts as well as Madhyamika and so on. And then that Khenpo continuously said no. And Pontsuk Rinpoche was rather very upset, and he just left. And the rest of us, we felt quite embarrassed at that moment. We felt that how could he reject the request from Pontsuk Rinpoche? Just like the professors nowadays who are rather very senior in a class or in a university, and they feel that they're very senior and they can make all kinds of decisions. Anyhow, this time I think the curriculum is probably not fitting to the requirement or for the requests of the practitioners. I understand that there are different kind of levels of requirements for people to attend that class. However, I feel that we can also be a little bit more flexible when practitioners, when our Sangha have a certain kind of requirement. I feel that you should report it to the Khenpos and Khenmos so that they will listen to your idea. Anyhow, this is just adding to our curriculum. Anyhow, I got sidetracked because of Bantita was about to challenge me, and we talked about the history and our curriculum. But now let's come back to the teaching, to the actual teaching. Now we got to the fourth example, that is the gold in the filth. The example says that while a man was traveling, gold owned by him fell into a place filled with rotting refuse. For example, a person who was walking around on the street, and at that time he was carrying the pure gold with him. A little while ago, lots of people made offering to me, and someone offered gold to me, and they offered their jewelry, such as earrings and rings and so on. I was thinking that maybe when people was purchasing all of those jewelries, they must have lots of attraction as well as attachment towards them. Therefore, I thought that I should put those gold into the best use. And then after contemplating, I offered it to the Treasury Department over here, and so that they can make food offering to the whole Sangha, and would be the best for the people who made offering to me. Nowadays, people would consider that gold are the most important, but I myself think that gold is rather very difficult to deal with. So whomsoever offered gold to me, I would then directly offer it to the whole Sangha. And over here it says that when a man was walking around, and then the gold fell into this pit of filth, just like how nowadays people would go to washroom with their cell phone, and then the cell phone would drop into the loo.
这样的时候呢，就是
And then at that time,
那么这个金子的话呢，虽然掉在那个
though gold fell into the rotting refuse, into this pit that is full of mud and even feces, but the nature of gold won't change because of its indestructible nature. It's really, even in a pit that is full of really filthy substance, the gold itself will remain for many centuries just as it was, without making any changes because of its indestructible nature. So it will stay in that pit for a long time. And then later on, a celestial being with the completely pure divine vision saw it there, and then addressed to someone who have a connection or have merit and said that purify this supreme precious gold lying here in this filth, and then convert it into something that is worth being made from such a precious substance. On top of such gold, there must be lots of filth and lots of mud, and it's covered, it's really dirty. But after you recover it, after you cleanse it, and then you can make all kinds of substance, all kinds of adornments, or all kinds of things from this piece of gold. This is an analogy, but it could happen as well. Just as it is stated in the great jewel heaps, the Sutra of Heap of Jewels, it says that just as pure gold falls into the filth, as its nature is spotless, it cannot be tinted by the filth. The nature of it is in fact completely pure, therefore there's no way for the filth to taint its nature. The nature of pure gold cannot be changed even after a long period of time. The pure gold would remain in such a state. So the previous one is the example. And now, what's the meaning of this analogy then? The meaning of it is that, likewise, the Muni sees the quality of beings, which is sunken in the filth like mental poisons. So the perfect Buddha, which is the great Muni, or the great wish-fulfilling jewel, the perfect Buddha then sees the Sugatagarbha, the Buddha nature, and the quality of beings, which is sunken in the mud of the filth-like mental poisons. The Buddha saw such gold-like nature of sentient beings, though it is sunken in the mud of filth like mental poisons. In fact, is present within all sentient beings, such kind of gold-like nature. Upon seeing this, he pours the mighty rain of his sacred Dharma upon all those beings in order to purify this mud of their afflictions. Within the 9 kinds of analogies, in fact, the only way of purifying such kind of nature is through the teaching of Dharma. If the Buddha wants to dispel the different kinds of filth tinted on the nature of sentient beings, we use the different kinds of analogies, such as the lotus flower and beehive and all of such. And as it is previously stated as well as over here, it says that the only way of doing so, of purifying so, is to give the teaching of Dharma so that the Sugatagarbha, that is the Buddha nature, will be revealed. During the teaching of this sutra, of this Shastra, in fact, you're a lay practitioner or a monastic, I think you should try your best and make the aspiration to give the teaching of this Buddha nature, on the teaching of Buddha nature, and share it to people In fact, this kind of sharing, this kind of giving would be much more than those of the giving of material. And this would be the best way of giving and offering to the sentient beings. You can give them the teaching according to their capacity and give this teaching with great skillful means, and to dispel the filth or dispel the coverage that is on top of this Buddha nature. So some of the teaching that is taught within this, you should remember it and keep it in your heart. And you should remember it on the day that you learn it, and keep it within your heart from that day on till you die. And you should make the aspiration that you use such kind of teaching to benefit all kinds of sentient beings for lifetimes to come. And in such a way, then you can give the teaching to all the sentient beings. I think in Larungar, as well as the Kempos and Kemmels over here, for many years, they have the opportunity to give the teaching of the Dharma. Lots of the tutors, mentors, they also have the opportunity to do so. Maybe this is something that you are thinking of, that I've received this kind of name, this kind of title from my gurus, and I have tried my best to give the teaching of the Dharma, making the offering of the Dharma to all sentient beings, and I feel very contented with this kind of fulfillment of my responsibility. Lots of people nowadays, they have the opportunity to give the teaching to the sentient beings with skillful means and in different situations and so on. Therefore, over here it also stated that on top of this gold, it is in fact covered by all kinds of filth. And there are various ways to dispel it, various ways of remove it. For example, on top of the gold, if it is covered with lots of filth, at first you should rub it off with rather coarse cloth, and then later on you should use the finer clothing to wipe it off and to polish it and so on. For the same reason, in fact, whenever we're trying to give the teachings to the sentient beings, when we're trying to guide the sentient beings, we should also then consider that the sentient beings have different kinds of situations, because different sentient beings have rather very different kinds of defilements. Some sentient beings have more defilements, such as when the gold is in the very deep part of the filthy pit, and it is completely covered, and it has a very thick layer of filth. And when you just fetch it out of the pit, then you will notice that it must be of a sentient being who is full of defilements, who is full of habitual patterns. And though this person has Sugatagarbha, this Buddha nature, but it has lots of habitual patterns. It's covered with very thick and very deep defilements and afflictions. No matter if you're monastic or you've been studying Buddhism for a long period of time, it is in fact still that in fact is still your habitual patterns. So sometimes then you should try to give the teaching of the Dharma according to their own kind of capacity. Sometimes you should give them the teaching of profound Dharma. Some of them you should give them the teaching of a rather very simple Dharma to lead them onto the path of the Dharma. There are people who are of very sharp capacity. When they listen to the Dharma for one or two sentences right away, the hundreds of gates of the Dharma is open to that person right away, such as great masters in Zen master as well as in the Vajrayana masters, they would just listen to one or two stanzas of the teaching right away, they attain enlightenment. And there are people, even after listening to many volumes of Dharma, they don't attain any kind of realization or insights at all. I think compared to the great masters, we really didn't listen to lots of Dharma, such as Genelo, who listened to so many volumes of Dharma, as well as Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. In his autobiography, I think it is also translated into the Chinese language now. In the autobiography of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, you would be able to see how many volumes of Dharma he had studied. And out of the biography, you'll be able to see that there are a whole chapter that is dedicated to the list of Dharma that he had listened before. So we have different kinds of defilements. The next one is the example and meaning combined. Once the celestial being has seen the gold that has fallen into the place full of rotten refuse, the rotten feces. In fact, the gold is covered with that. And insistently, he directed a person who has such connection as well as merit to obtain such gold. So he directs that man and directs that man's attention to the supreme beautiful thing that is the gold, so he may completely cleanse it. And seeing within all beings the precious perfect Buddha that has fallen into the great filth of mental poisons. When people cleanse this piece of gold for the same reason, in fact, the victorious one, that is the Buddha, does the same thing. And he saw the precious perfect Buddha within everyone, and he teaches the Dharma to persuade them to purify it. After the Buddha saw that all sentient beings has this Buddha nature, then he gave the teaching of the Dharma and encouraged people to cleanse their inner gold, that is the Buddha nature, and encourage them to practice. So this teaching on Buddha nature is really important. We have to understand it first. Last year, I contemplated like such. I thought to myself, if I were to give the teaching of Buddha nature to all the disciples, then I think I must bestow the best gift to you and be of great benefit to you. Because if you were not aware of this, it's such a pity. And you're just a poor, wretched being without knowing that you inherently has such a gold-like nature. It doesn't matter how much you study and practice, without knowing this, then it is really meaningless. When we look at the history, lots of great masters and great realized ones, in fact, they also talked about the importance of the Buddha nature. A book talked about how Master Xuanzang, when he went to the kingdom of Magadha, and at that time there was a statue of Avalokiteshvara. At that time, Master Xuanzang started to prostrate and supplicate to that statue of Avalokiteshvara, and he made the three aspirations or wishes over there. And because of such such kind of wishes, he were able to go back to China at that time. The first wish he made was that with the merit that he has, he wishes to be reborn into Shita heaven. And if that wish could be accomplished, then the flower would fall onto the shoulder of that statue. And the second one is if all sentient beings have Buddha nature, then the flower would fall onto the neck, the back of the neck of the Avalokiteshvara's statue. And the third one is that if his teaching were true, then the flower garland would fall right onto the head of the statue. And it indeed all fell into those places. So people were quite amazed by this, and then he successfully went back to China and then gave the translation and the teachings. At that time, in fact, Master Xuanzang thought that there are people who are the Ichantikas, which means the ones who have completely eradicated the Buddha nature. But by this kind of aspiration, the flower did fall onto the shoulder of the statue. And it's wonderful that the flower didn't fall elsewhere. So upon contemplating on these kind of stories, I think we should consider ourselves as extremely fortunate because we have all the kinds of shastras and teachings based on these teachings. And we have the doctrines and the teachings quoted from the Buddha and all kinds of texts so that we'll be able to set the right view, to develop the right view. As I stated earlier, in fact, all sentient beings, that is, as this book stated earlier, all sentient beings has a Buddha nature. And if you don't have this Buddha nature, there's no way to cleanse the defilement upon it if the nature of this Buddha nature is not pure. So according to the Tathagata Sutra, it says that the Sugata vision is like this. He sees that for all kinds of beings, the Tathagata Dhatu is not destroyed, though it is submerged in the muddy silt of kleshas. Previously, during the teachings earlier, during the stage of a mundane being or bodhisattvahood or the Buddhahood, in fact, this Buddha nature is always there. Therefore, we should set up or develop the correct view with the doctrine and with the teaching. After each analogy, I'll take a sip of water. And now let's continue. Now, the fifth analogy, which is the analogy of treasure under the earth or in the earth. If an inexhaustible treasure were buried in the ground beneath a poor man's house, the man would not know of it. a poor man who is thirsty and hungry and is completely wretched, live a complete wretched life. He does not know, had no idea that there is a treasure underneath his house. And the treasure itself won't speak and tell him, I'm here. Nowadays, the different kinds of treasures include gold and oil, and I think this is usually considered as a treasure. But the poor man has no idea of this. He has no idea that there is gold underneath or treasure underneath his house. He has no idea, and there's no way for him to know. And the treasure won't say that, hello, I'm here, I am treasure. The treasure won't speak out for himself, for itself either. And even if the treasure speak out, I think the poor man would be really terrified and run away, because he probably would take the treasure as demons. So the meaning is that the treasure won't reveal itself and say that this is treasure, then you should use it to dispel your poverty. It reminds me a story of when I was herding yaks on the mountains. On top of mountain, there's a big rock. I found a long adornment. And at that time, I thought this must be silver, and someone must have hid this for a long period of time. And I looked around, there was no one around, and then I took it back to my home. My family used a long time to investigate what it was. It's a big adornment. At that time, a relative came to me and said that there must be some treasure hidden underneath. And he asked my father and as well as other relatives to continuously to dig underneath that rock. But after several days, there was nothing removed. So whenever I go to the lower Lokama, and when I look at that valley over there, it really reminds me of that piece of silver I found at that time. Not sure if it's from someone some people from earlier time who hid it or have no idea what it was. At that time, I thought to myself that maybe it's the protector who hid it here, because at the time I live in a rather poor family, but maybe the protector don't have such kind of ability to do so. A similar story, though. Prasanati, the king Prasanati, his daughter Vajra, Princess Vajra, who's very beautiful, and she has deep faith in Buddhism, and she has lots of merit. And the princess doesn't have lots of faith to his father, though. So she's really beautiful, and she has lots of merit, and people really like you, very popular. And the king tried to persuade her that it is all because of him, all because of the king's merit. And then the daughter said, no, I don't think so, because I have my own karma, I have my own merit, and it is all because of my own merit that I am enjoying all of these. So at that time, the king got really angry and said that, you really think so? How could you say that it's your own merit? And he continuously asked her for 3 times. And then the princess replied, said, yeah, I think it's all because of my own merit. And then the king got really upset and said, okay, let's see about that. Then the king married his daughter to the poorest man, that is the beggar in the country. And he said that now you can get out of my palace, and let's see if it is really because of your own merit. And then the princess said that, sure, no problem. I will leave this palace. She left with her husband. And on the way, the princess asked, so what do you have nowadays? And the beggar said that, I used to be very rich, but now my parents are deceased, and I have no place to live. I have nothing left. And then the princess continued to ask, saying that, where did you used to live? And he said that, oh, now there's only ruins left on that land. So they went back to that piece of land and want to build a palace for them, or a home for themselves. And on that land, when the princess stepped on that land, the earth naturally opened up, and treasure naturally revealed itself to the princess. And then they sold the treasure, built their palace, and hired lots of servants. All kinds of servants and maidens. With such kind of merit, they then built a big palace that is bigger than her father, King Prasanati. And then King Prasanati, after a little while, remembered his daughter, and he thought to himself, I wonder what happened to my princess. And then he asked his retinues, and his retinue replied to him, saying that, no, she's doing really wonderful, probably even better than you, my king. And then the people told him what happened. King Prasanati didn't want to believe it at the beginning. And then the princess is rather very kind, and she invited her father to her own palace. And once King Prasanati saw her palace, and he thought, wow, this palace is better than mine. And that's the moment he realized this is exactly as how the Buddha taught. It is that everyone has their own merit and their own karma. It all must be because of my daughter's previous good karma that she has such merit, and now she has such a beautiful palace for her own. So it's quite. So this incident then developed the firm confidence for King Prasanati to believe in the teachings of cause and conditions and karma. You may only feel that this is just a story, but that's not really. But in fact, this is not just a story. There are people who get rich within one night. I asked the person who got rich within one night, and he told me that he bought a piece of land, and then somehow they discovered a coal underneath that piece of land. And now he told me that he's not worried about money at all. He's very rich. Some of this kind of merit is rather quite interesting, how the merit would reveal itself. For example, Dubai. I've heard of Dubai. And I think Dubai is rather quite an interesting place. I really want to go there and visit, not for my own enjoyment. Rather, I want to go there and see how that country got rich within one night. 30 years ago, Dubai was just a piece of desert, and now it is one of the most developed countries in the world. And lots of things are quite, unbelievable. How the buildings and how the people used to live. For example, how the people got rich after just within one night. It is very similar to the story that we just heard, isn't it? And let's look at lots of the Arabic countries. They have resources that could make them rich within a quick period of time. Someone singing. In terms of the Dharma teaching, yes, they don't have such kind of correct path to practice. However, their resources are very different, such as Saudi Arabia. The country was established back in 1932, and the king had 38 wives, the first king of Saudi Arabia. And then he had 127 princes. And then after a period of time, the 127 princes developed into 5,000 princes. Recently, a person who was arrested in America, in fact, he pretended that he was the prince, one of the princes from Saudi Arabia. And because that he faked himself as the prince, his actions earned him lots of money by lying to people. Let's look at people who live in different areas. Maybe their lifestyle was very different just a few decades ago, but look at how they live their life now. It is all because of the differences of the merit. If the conditions of the merit would mature, then you would gain lots of merit. And if your merit were to dissipate, then all of the things that you used to have would dissipate simultaneously as well. So in our relative world, there's such kind of displays of the differences of merit and cause and condition. But in the ultimate aspect, in the pure aspect, the Sugatagarbha had never changed. Every sentient being's causes and conditions are very different. Their karma and habitual patterns are very different. And if we were to observe and contemplate with depth, then you'll be able to understand and develop faith and confidence in such teaching. There are many wonderful spiritual teachers in this world. Just by observing their actions and behaviors, you'll be able to learn a lot. So this phenomenal world is really our textbook. So we were talking about the treasure, isn't it? And now, previously we were talking from the aspect of analogy, and now we're going to talk from the aspect of meaning. Likewise, the precious treasure is contained in each being's mind. This is the true state, which is free from defilement, nothing to be added and nothing to be removed. This Buddha nature, it does not have any defilement. It doesn't have anything to build up on, it doesn't have anything to develop, to increase, to decrease. And this kind of teaching, in fact, is not known to people who have not attained enlightenment yet. It is because that we have not attained enlightenment, have not seen this true nature. So we're just like the poor man who's suffering from deprivation. If you were to know that you have this wonderful Buddha nature, you won't be suffering. If you were to discover this Buddha nature, you won't be suffering anymore, but be very happy. And everything in this world is is really beautiful and enjoyable. So that was the meaning. Now both combined. When a precious treasure is contained within the ground beneath a poor man's house, and the treasure would not yell out and say that I'm here, and the man does not know of its presence, because the man doesn't have such merit to reveal it. I think people are very much like that. When people are young, we cannot see how a wonderful person this young child would become, a scientist or someone who would make a great contribution and so on. When you look at those famous celebrities as well as scientists' pictures when they are young, then you would be quite in awe, thinking that, wow, there's no way to tell that this person would become so famous. For the same reason, it is stated that just like the treasure that is hidden underneath a poor man's house, the Dharma's treasure lies in the house of their mind, and the great sage truly takes birth within the world to cause them to attain this treasure. But the sentient beings, without the knowledge of this Dharma treasure that lies within their own minds, in fact, would suffer if it were not because of if they do not receive the teachings from the great sage, that is the Buddha, the Tathagata, Shakyamuni Buddha. Because of Shakyamuni Buddha's teaching, the turning of the wheel of Dharma, which reminded me that Master Yin Guang quoted from the Lotus Sutra, that he said the Buddha Bhagavan appear in this world for one great purpose alone, which is to cause sentient beings to aspire toward, to manifest to them, to cause them to attain and enter the path of the wisdom and insight of the Buddhas. Some people feel that the only reason that they are living in this world because they want to accomplish a great career for their family members and so on. But the only reason for the Buddha to appear in this world is for one great purpose alone, that is to cause sentient beings to attain liberation, to see the nature of the mind, to lead and guide the sentient beings to see their nature of mind. And we should develop faith in this teaching. In the later part of this text, it is said that the ultimate truth is attained through faith. The Tathagata Sutra are very explicit in terms of each of the analogy, very detailedly explained. According to the Tathagata Sutra, it is stated that if you believe what I have taught you about all having a treasure store and practice it faithfully and ardently, employing virtuous expedients, you will quickly attain the unexcelled path.
会需要这样的，所以这一点呢，就是我们这个要有这个信心。
We should have faith and develop faith to the Buddha, to the lineage masters, to the Dharma. We should develop faith towards all of them. In fact, faith is so important. If you were to have faith towards this Dharma text, towards this Tathagata, then wherever I go, I will take it with me, and by taking it along with me at all times, it will naturally bless me and provide strength to me. Similarly to the statue, if you were to carry a statue at all times and have a certain kinds of affection towards this statue, then it will create a certain special connection for you and that statue, and it will naturally then grant you blessings. Khenpo Deba has great faith towards Ponzu Rinpoche as well as his root guru. And because of such kind of faith, the blessings and wisdom that is brought to Khenpo Deba is very special, very unique. So if you were to have faith, then the simple teaching that we studied, that you have treasure, will give you benefit. For example, the Uttaratantra Shastra give you this teaching, even some very simple teaching would be able to lead you to liberation even. For example, Master Huihai, he went to Mazu and want to study from him. And Mazu asked, why are you here? And Master Huihai said that, I'm here to study the Dharma. And Mazu said that, well, look around, it's empty over here. You have your own treasure. I have nothing to offer you. And then Master Huihai at that moment, he said that, I came from a faraway place. How could you say that you have nothing and I have a treasure? I have nothing. Really, I have nothing. And he said that, and then Mazu said that, I have nothing to teach you. In fact, you have everything already. And then Master Huihai continued to ask that, what is my own treasure? And then Mazu said that the mind, that you should watch your own mind. In fact, such kind of mind is already your own treasure. And I think this is really because of the merit of the master right away. Master Huihai attaining enlightenment right away on the spot. Not sure if sentient beings nowadays could be able to attain enlightenment through just a simple teaching, through simple teaching like that. If you were to attain enlightenment right away like that, then it doesn't matter if you still attend classes. If you were to study the Abhidharma or Madhyamika for 10 years or so, in fact, you don't have to do that anymore. If you can attain enlightenment right away, you can just say bye. That is then both combined. Now let's come to the sixth. That is example. The seed contained in the fruit of a mango or similar trees.
这样的那个，他这里先就是说这个芒果呢，就是我们就是说烟幕鲁布。
The Amrapali fruit, that is the mango fruit. Over here it says that the seed contains in the fruit of mango or similar trees is possessed of the indestructible property of sprouting. Once it gets plowed, earth, water, and other conditions, such as fertile soil and all kinds of conditions such as this, and then the substance of a majestic tree will gradually grow out of the seed. In fact, I think the mango tree is not that tall. The tallest one is probably over a dozen of meters, especially the trees that grows in the grove. In the letter to a friend, as well as Bodhisattva Charyavatara, he talks quite a bit about Amrapali fruit. When I went to India, the popular fruit was, in fact, the fruit that we all really enjoyed was bananas and mangoes. Bonzo Rinpoche really liked bananas. I think because India was really hot, and I think eating bananas was really helpful in terms of the heat. Somehow, Bonzo Rinpoche called bananas as the tail of yaks, because the bananas over there in India was rather thinner, and it looks just, and it's curvy and just looks like the tail of a yak. Sometimes when the bananas were not offered to him, he would buy it for himself. There are mangoes as well as bananas, but mangoes were expensive, therefore we had bananas. So he said over here that a mango or a tata tree, in fact, out of a very small seed, then it has the potential to grow a majestic tree, just as Nyagroda tree. In fact, the seed is very small, but the tree would grow to be meters tall, or yojanas tall. Yojana, the word yojana, I think it was a habitual way of counting, or a habitual way of measuring, because it would be very difficult to measure a tall tree at the time. Anyhow, the Nyagroda tree and other kinds of tall trees, maybe they're as tall as over 30 meters or 20 meters. Some of them would grow into a majestic tree. So I myself would think in such a way that in the words of my perfect teacher, where he talks about how the tree would be certain yojanas tall and certain yojanas wide and so on, just like how we would describe in the Chinese language as hundreds of thousands, which is not a specific number, but rather it is a way to describe. So previously was the example. Now let's look at the meaning of this example. It says that the fruit consisting of the ignorance of the other defects of beings contains in this shroud of its peel and the virtuous element of the Dhammakaya. Through the accumulation of merit, as well as dispelling or purification of our habitual patterns or negative karma, then the tree then the Buddha nature could be reviewed, or the tree could grow out of the seed. But you have to practice systematically. Unlike some people would come to me to say that I have to attain enlightenment right away. And tomorrow when and I've already bought the ticket to go back tomorrow. I have to fly back tomorrow. I have to attain enlightenment right away today. But this is really not that easy. Maybe it is easy for those people who already bought the return ticket. And the next one is that by means of water, sunlight, wind, earth, time, space, and the necessary conditions, the tree grows from within, and the narrow shroud of the fruit would continue to come out, will gradually grow out of that seed. You need the elements such as earth. You need time, spring, summer, fall. Because if you were to plant the seed today and expect it to grow right away, it won't happen. And on top of that, you need the space as well. You need the space for the tree to grow. And with all these kinds of favorable conditions, then the substance of a majestic tree will gradually come out. Over here, in the English version of it, it says the fruit of mango, which is correct, and the second one is the Nyagorodha. A Nyagorodha tree in this version is fine, but in the version that Khenpo is teaching, it is the Tata tree. The Tata tree is a tree that grows large leaves, and the leaves were used to transcribe sutras, the teachings of the Buddha. And there's another tree is called Shurya tree. Shurya tree is another type of tall tree that is usually used in different kinds of teachings of the Buddha. So with the favorable conditions such as purification as well as accumulation of merit, then the tree would grow, just like how the sentient beings will be able to see the truth of the Dharma. That is the Dharmakaya. Likewise, through relying on virtue, this element also will gradually turn into the substance of a king of Munis. If the conditions are not met, are not suffice, then it will be very difficult for you to attain enlightenment right away. According to the Prajnaparamita Shastra, where it stated that the sun shines on every corner equally. When it shines, then the ripened flowers or the mature flowers buds will open. But while the buds that are not mature, not ripened enough, will not open even under this condition. In order for the flowers to blossom, they need all the conditions. And a mature flower, under all favorable conditions, they will blossom naturally. Doesn't matter how much you try to stop it. And the flower, if it is not mature, if it is not ready to open yet, then doesn't matter how favorable the conditions are, then it won't blossom right away. In the Great Treatise on the Perfection of Wisdom, it then stated again that in fact, it is the same to the Buddha that although the Buddha teaches equally, those who have ready virtuous seeds will mature. Those who do not have will not mature. The Buddha gives the teaching equally, such as Pontsukar Rinpoche as well as great masters. When they give teachings to hundreds and thousands of people, they would give them profound teaching to all of them. But to the people who have the matured virtues, they will gain insights or realizations right away. But for people who do not have such kind of a mature, who are not mature in their virtues, they would not gain benefit from it at all. And not only they don't gain benefit, they may even develop wrong view based on the profound teachings. So it's very different. In the teachings, some of them, in this kind of teachings that is provided equally, there are people who attain realization and then people who attain wrong views. So when you're listening to the teachings from a great master, I think this is rather very similar. Whatever great masters you're studying from, it is the same. But what's the most important is to change your mind stream and to make progress based on such teachings. If you were not to make the positive progression, rather you make negative retrogression, then I think you are treading on the wrong path. So when you're studying the Dharma, I think the important aspect is that whether you are mature or not. And the other one is whether you can persist. A little earlier, I awarded those Sangha members who participated in the after-class discussion groups. I gifted those Khenpos and Khenmos award for those Khenpos and Khenmos who persisted for 10 years, over a decade. And I gifted them something very unique, that is 500 RMB. This is really just a sign. This is just a gesture. But my intention was that, in fact, it is very difficult to persevere for 10 years. Not only, let's not talk about 10 years. It would be difficult to persevere for 10 days. There are people who feel that they don't have such kind of condition to study for 5 days or 7 days. And they would feel headache and handache and so on. So it's quite important to persevere and to try your hardest so that you will gain fruition. And this year, we'll stop it here.